Your anxiety is not random. It is not a personality flaw, not weakness, not just how you are. It is a system running a pattern, and patterns can be interrupted. In the next few minutes, you are going to feel your mental noise slow down, not because you escaped your thoughts, but because you learned how to change the way your mind processes them. Anxiety feels overwhelming because it creates the illusion that everything is happening at once. But that is not reality. That is mismanaged mental bandwidth. And the moment you understand this, you stop being a victim of your mind and start becoming its operator. Right now, your brain is behaving like a machine overloaded with parallel processes. Too many predictions, too many what-ifs, too many imagined futures competing for attention. The human nervous system was never designed to simulate dozens of possible disasters simultaneously. When it tries, the output is anxiety, rapid heart rate, mental fog, urgency without direction. The mistake most people make is trying to fight the thoughts themselves. That is inefficient. You don't stop anxiety by arguing with every line of code. You stop it by changing how the system allocates processing power. The first strategy is called cognitive narrowing. Anxiety expands your field of concern beyond what your mind can handle. It tells you everything matters right now. Your job is to prove to your nervous system that this is false. Look around you and select one physical object. Just one. It can be a door handle, your phone, the edge of a table. Your mind will resist. It wants to keep scanning for threats. Ignore that impulse. Fix your attention on the object and begin to describe it mentally with absurd precision. Its color, texture, shape, temperature, weight, reflections of light, imperfections, shadows. Do not rush. Your brain cannot maintain high anxiety while performing detailed sensory analysis. These two processes compete for the same neural resources. This is not distraction. This is redirection of computational capacity. Anxiety lives in abstract prediction. Sensory detail lives in the present. When you force the brain to process reality at high resolution, it temporarily loses the ability to simulate catastrophic futures at the same intensity. Within 60 to 90 seconds, most people feel their breathing slow slightly. Not because the problem disappeared, but because the system's alarm signal weakened. Here is the critical part. Do not check if it's working. Monitoring your anxiety keeps the threat system active. Stay with the object longer than feels necessary. Let your attention become almost boringly specific. The brain interprets sustained sensory focus as evidence that the environment is safe enough to examine closely. Safety signals reduce cortisol output. Less cortisol means less physical anxiety. This is biology, not motivation. You may notice thoughts still trying to intrude. That's normal. The brain does not stop producing predictions just because you changed focus. When a thought appears, don't wrestle it. Label it once, silently. Prediction, memory, or imagined future. Then return to the object. This labeling activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for regulation. Each label is a micro-assertion of control. You are reminding the system, thoughts are events, not commands. If this is already shifting something inside you, pause for a second and acknowledge it. Not dramatically, just a quiet recognition. Your mind can change state faster than you were taught. That realization alone reduces helplessness, and helplessness is fuel for anxiety. Now, the second strategy works at a deeper level. Anxiety accelerates time perception. It creates the sensation that something must be solved immediately. Urgency without clarity is one of the mind's most destabilizing states. The antidote is temporal distancing. Instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" you ask a different computational question. Will this matter in 5 years? Not emotionally, but analytically. Your brain is terrible at perspective when anxious. It treats minor uncertainties as existential threats. By projecting forward in time, you force the mind to rescale the problem. Many situations triggering anxiety today will be irrelevant in months. Some will not. That is not the point. The act of time-scaling itself reduces emotional intensity. You are shifting from survival mode to evaluation mode. Take the current source of your anxiety and imagine explaining it to a future version of yourself 5 years from now. Picture that version listening. Older, with more experiences, more solved problems behind them. Would they see this as a defining catastrophe or a temporary challenge? This visualization recruits long-term memory networks instead of immediate threat circuits. The emotional charge drops because the brain recognizes continuity. You survived many anxious moments before. Evidence of survival weakens the prediction of disaster. Do not confuse this with minimizing your feelings. You're not saying the problem is small. You are saying your system is bigger than this moment. Anxiety shrinks your sense of self to the size of the threat. Perspective expands it again. There is something important happening here. You are teaching your nervous system that not every internal alarm requires full mobilization. Over time, repeated use of these strategies recalibrates your baseline. Anxiety episodes become shorter, less convincing, less dominant. You are training mental inhibition, the ability to not follow every thought to its conclusion. That is one of the most powerful cognitive skills a human can develop. Notice what did not happen. You did not solve your entire life. You did not eliminate uncertainty. You simply changed the way your mind processed information for a few minutes. And that was enough to reduce the intensity. Anxiety depends on the illusion of permanence. Interrupt a pattern, and you expose its temporary nature. Right now, before you move on, make a quiet commitment. The next time anxiety spikes, you will run one of these strategies instead of spiraling automatically. That decision alone creates a new neural pathway. And if this way of understanding your mind makes sense to you, write in the comments, "I can operate my mind." Not for performance, but as a signal to yourself that you are no longer just experiencing your thoughts. You are learning to manage them. Stay here, breathe normally, look at your surroundings again. The system is already quieter than it was a few minutes ago. That means you are not trapped. You are learning the architecture of your own mind, and that changes everything. What you just experienced is not a trick. It is a reconfiguration of how attention, prediction, and perception interact inside your nervous system. Anxiety convinces you that it is an emotional storm you must endure. In reality, it is a processing style, fast, wide, and threat-oriented. The moment you narrow, label, and rescale, you are not suppressing anxiety. You are shifting the architecture that sustains it. There is another layer most people never see. Anxiety feels like it comes from the outside world, but it is largely driven by internal simulation. Your brain is constantly modeling possible futures. That ability is one of the greatest strengths of human intelligence. It allows planning, creativity, and foresight. But when this system runs without regulation, imagination turns into continuous threat rehearsal. Your body then reacts to simulations as if they are current events. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, breathing shortens, all in response to situations that are not happening right now. This is why logic alone rarely stops anxiety. You can know something is probably fine and still feel terrible, because the system generating the feeling is not the same system generating the logical argument. One is predictive and emotional, the other is analytical and verbal. The strategies you are learning work because they influence the predictive system indirectly through attention and perspective, rather than trying to overpower it with reasoning. Let's go deeper into what happens when you label a thought as prediction or memory. That simple act creates separation between you and the mental event. Without that separation, thoughts feel like reality. With it, thoughts become data. Data can be observed. Reality demands reaction. This distinction is small but neurologically significant. Observation activates networks associated with regulation and control. Reaction activates survival circuits. The more often you observe instead of react, the less authority anxious thoughts carry. You may notice that anxiety often returns when your mind has idle capacity. When nothing external requires attention, the brain resumes internal simulation. This is not a flaw. It is an efficiency mechanism. The brain prefers to stay active, but if you never train where that activity goes, it defaults to scanning for problems. Over time, this creates a baseline sense of unease, as if something is always about to go wrong. One way to interrupt this pattern outside of anxious moments is to practice intentional single-channel focus for short periods during the day. 5 minutes of doing one task with full attention, eating, walking, washing dishes, reading, without parallel stimulation. No phone, no background media, no multitasking. This trains your attentional system to stabilize instead of scatter. A stable attentional system produces fewer runaway thought chains. Fewer chains mean fewer anxiety spikes. Your mind is like a powerful computing device. If you open too many processes, performance degrades. Not because the machine is defective, but because resource allocation is poor. Anxiety is often the signal of cognitive overload, not personal inadequacy. When you treat it as a system state instead of a personal identity, shame decreases, and reduced shame removes another layer of mental noise. There is also the physical component. When anxious, breathing becomes shallow and rapid. This is not just a symptom, it is a feedback loop. Fast breathing signals danger to the brain. The brain increases alertness. Alertness increases anxiety. Slowing the breath slightly, not forcing deep breaths, just lengthening the exhale, interrupts this loop. A longer exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for calming the body. The body then sends safety signals back to the brain. This is bidirectional regulation. Mind influences body, body influences mind. You do not need perfect control for this to work. Even a small shift in breathing rhythm can reduce intensity. Think of it as adjusting the volume, not turning the system off. Expecting instant silence creates frustration, which reactivates stress. Expecting gradual reduction aligns with how the nervous system actually functions. Another key principle: anxiety is amplified by avoidance. When you treat the feeling as dangerous, your brain learns that anxiety itself is a threat. This creates fear of fear, a powerful accelerator. But when you can stay present while using these strategies, you teach the system a different lesson. The sensation is uncomfortable, but survivable. Each time you remain without escaping, the brain updates its model. The predicted catastrophe, "I can't handle this," is proven false. This is how resilience is built. Not by eliminating discomfort, but by changing your relationship to it. Over time, anxiety may still appear, but it loses its authority. It becomes a signal, not a command. Consider this: every anxious episode you have ever had ended. Maybe not quickly, maybe not comfortably, but it ended. Your system returned to baseline. That is evidence. Your mind tends to ignore this data and focus on the intensity of the moment instead. Reminding yourself that anxiety is temporary is not wishful thinking. It is statistically accurate based on your lived experience. Right now, as you listen, notice the difference between the idea of anxiety and the immediate physical sensations in your body. They are not the same. Sensations are pressure, tightness, warmth, movement. The idea is something is wrong. When you separate sensation from story, intensity drops. Stories escalate. Sensations change naturally if you allow them. You are not trying to become someone who never feels anxious. You are becoming someone who understands the mechanics of the feeling. Understanding reduces mystery. Reduced mystery reduces fear. And less fear means the system activates less often. If this framework is giving you a sense of clarity you did not have before, take a moment later today to apply one of these techniques deliberately. Even if your anxiety is mild, training in low-intensity moments strengthens the skill for high-intensity ones. And if you want to keep learning how to operate your mind, instead of being driven by it, stay connected here and continue exploring these tools. Mastery is not built in a single insight, but in repeated application. You are not broken. Your system is responsive, adaptable, and learning right now. Anxiety is loud, but it is not in control unless you leave the controls unattended. The more you practice, the more natural regulation becomes. And one day, you will notice something subtle but powerful. The space between a thought and your reaction to it has grown. In that space is choice, and choice is where calm begins. There is a moment in every anxious spiral that most people miss. It is the split second where a sensation becomes a story. A slight tightness in the chest turns into something is wrong. A racing thought turns into I'm losing control. A normal uncertainty becomes this will end badly. And that transition happens so fast it feels automatic, but it is learned, and anything learned can be relearned. Your brain is a prediction engine. Its primary job is not happiness, not confidence, not even calm. Its job is survival. It constantly asks one question: what might go wrong next? This is useful when crossing a street or handling real risk. But in modern life, the system rarely powers down. It keeps scanning even when you are physically safe. The result is chronic false alarms. Anxiety is often not danger, it is over-prediction. The mind does not only predict events, it predicts feelings. It says, if that happens, I won't cope. This is where anxiety tightens its grip. The fear is not just of the situation, but of your imagined inability to handle it. But look at the evidence of your life. You have handled every difficult moment you have ever encountered up to this point. Not perfectly, not comfortably, but successfully enough to still be here. The system underestimates your resilience because it focuses on imagined failure instead of remembered survival. This is why recalling past coping is powerful, not as empty reassurance, but as data. Your brain updates its predictions based on evidence. When you consciously remind yourself, I have felt this before and it passed, you are feeding the system corrective information. Anxiety thrives on the illusion that this time is different, worse, unmanageable. Reality shows a pattern: activation, discomfort, resolution. There is also something else happening during anxiety that few people understand. Your attentional spotlight narrows toward threat, but your sense of control narrows even more. You feel small compared to the problem. Everything feels urgent and personal, but urgency is often a distortion of time perception. When anxious, minutes feel compressed. The brain pushes you to act now, solve now, escape now. Yet most problems do not require immediate action. They require measured action. By slowing your mental pace, you are not being passive, you are restoring accuracy. One simple way to do this is to deliberately slow one small movement. It could be how you lift a cup, how you turn your head, how you place your feet while walking. Move slightly slower than usual for 30 seconds. This sounds insignificant, but it sends a signal to your nervous system that there is no immediate emergency. The body influences the mind as much as the mind influences the body. When movements slow, the system recalibrates its threat assessment downward. Anxiety also feeds on mental certainty about negative outcomes. It says, I know this will go wrong. But this is not knowledge. It is probability treated as fact. A useful mental habit is adding 2 words to anxious thoughts. I'm predicting. Instead of this will be a disaster, it becomes I'm predicting this will be a disaster. That shift seems minor, but it changes the thought from a declaration to a hypothesis. Hypotheses can be questioned. Declarations feel final. Your mind respects precision. Vague fear is powerful. Specific analysis weakens it. If a worry repeats, ask, what exactly am I afraid will happen? Then ask, what would I actually do if that occurred? Planning is different from rumination. Planning moves towards solutions. Rumination circles problems without exit. When you move into concrete steps, the brain senses agency. Agency reduces anxiety because the system no longer feels trapped. Another overlooked factor is mental fatigue. When your brain is tired, regulation weakens. Thoughts feel louder, more convincing. What feels like a life crisis at night often feels manageable in the morning. This is not denial, it is neurochemistry. A fatigued brain struggles to inhibit threat signals. Recognizing this prevents you from taking every anxious thought as urgent truth. Sometimes the most effective strategy is rest, hydration, or stepping away from stimulation. You are not trying to silence your mind. You are training it to operate with better filters. Just as a skilled engineer optimizes a system by reducing unnecessary processes, you are reducing unhelpful mental loops. Each time you narrow attention, label a thought, slow your movement, lengthen your exhale, or rescale time, you are strengthening regulatory circuits. These circuits become more efficient with use. There will still be moments when anxiety surges quickly. That does not mean you failed. It means the system activated faster than your regulation. What matters is what happens next. The sooner you apply a strategy, the shorter the episode tends to be. Progress is not measured by never feeling anxious again. It is measured by recovery speed and reduced intensity. Notice how different this approach is from fighting your mind. You are not at war with yourself. You are learning the mechanics of your own cognition. When you understand the system, frustration decreases, curiosity replaces fear. Instead of, why am I like this? It becomes, what process is running right now? That question alone creates psychological distance. If at this point you can feel even a slight increase in clarity, acknowledge that. Not with excitement, just with recognition. Your state shifted because you applied understanding. That means your mind is not fixed. It is dynamic, trainable, adaptable. Later today, try using one of these methods even if your anxiety is only mild. That is how you build skill, not just relief. And if this way of thinking about anxiety helps you feel more capable inside your own head, take a moment to share your experience in the comments. When you put insight into words, it strengthens the learning. Stay connected if you want to keep developing this mental control, because the more you practice, the more natural calm becomes. Anxiety may still knock on the door, but you are no longer standing outside in the storm. You are inside the control room, learning which switches do what. And that changes everything. There is one more shift that changes everything, and most people never make it. They try to eliminate anxiety before they give themselves permission to function. They wait to feel calm before acting, speaking, deciding, or living. But anxiety does not disappear because you waited. In fact, waiting often teaches your brain that anxiety is a barrier too big to move through. The system then reinforces it. The real leverage point is different. You move while anxious, and in doing so, you show your nervous system that activation does not equal incapacity. Your brain constantly updates its model of you. If every time anxiety appears, you stop, avoid, or retreat, the brain records, anxiety means danger, stop everything. But if, even with a slightly elevated heart rate or mental noise, you continue a simple action, answering a message, walking into a room, finishing a task, the brain records something else. Anxiety can be present, and I can still operate. That update weakens future alarms. This is not about forcing yourself into overwhelming situations. It is about micro-proof. small demonstrations of capability while the system is activated. Each one is like recalibrating a sensor that has become too sensitive. Over time, the alarm threshold rises. The mind stops reacting to every internal signal as if it were a crisis. Another important detail: anxiety often creates the illusion of urgency without clarity. You feel like you must do something immediately, but you don't know what. This state is destabilizing because action is the natural response to perceived threat, yet the threat is abstract. The result is restless mental pacing. When this happens, give your system a clear but simple task, something concrete and finite. Organize a small space, write a short list, wash a cup. The content of the action matters less than the structure. Structure tells the brain, energy has a direction. Direction reduces chaos. You might think these adjustments are too small to influence something as intense as anxiety, but the nervous system responds to patterns, not grand gestures. Repeated small signals of safety, agency, and completion reshape baseline functioning. Anxiety grows in ambiguity. It shrinks in clarity. There is also the question of identity. Many people unconsciously fuse with the label anxious person. When anxiety appears, it feels like confirmation of who they are. But anxiety is a state, not a trait. States change. Traits feel permanent. The more you observe anxiety as a process happening within you, not as you, the less it defines your self-image. And identity beliefs strongly influence emotional patterns. If you see yourself as someone learning regulation, the brain searches for evidence of improvement. If you see yourself as inherently anxious, the brain searches for proof of struggle. Pay attention to your internal language. I am anxious feels different from anxiety is present. The first is identity, the second is observation. That subtle difference creates psychological space. In that space, regulation becomes possible. Something else happens as you practice these mental strategies. Your tolerance for internal sensation increases. At first, a slight increase in heart rate may feel alarming. Later, it feels like background noise. The sensations themselves often do not change dramatically. Your interpretation does, and interpretation drives intensity. Think of anxiety like a loud notification system that has been set too sensitive. You are not smashing the system, you are adjusting the sensitivity settings. That requires repetition, not force. There will be days when you forget to apply these tools quickly, days when the spiral runs longer. That does not erase progress. Learning is not linear. The important part is returning to the strategies instead of returning to self-criticism. Self-criticism activates the same threat circuits as external stress. Kind, precise correction is more effective. I got caught in it. That happens. Now I redirect. That tone keeps the regulatory system online. Notice also how anxiety narrows imagination toward negative outcomes, but calm expands possibility. As your baseline anxiety decreases, creativity and problem-solving increase. The same predictive brain that once generated endless worst-case scenarios can generate solutions, ideas, and opportunities when not dominated by threat bias. You are not removing your mind's power. You are reclaiming it from a single mode of operation. Right now, reflect on something, a moment in the past when you felt anxious and later realized it passed faster than you expected. That memory is not trivial. It is evidence that your system can self-correct. You are now adding conscious tools to a process that already happens naturally. That combination, natural recovery plus deliberate regulation, is powerful. If this way of understanding your anxiety makes you feel even slightly more in control than before, hold on to that. That feeling is not accidental. It is the result of shifting from helplessness to operation. And if this perspective is helping you see your mind differently, take a moment to write a simple commitment to yourself in the comments. Something like, I can handle this state, not for anyone else, but to reinforce the message internally. Stay with these practices. Return to them when needed. You are not trying to create a life without activation. You are building a system that can activate and return to balance efficiently. That is resilience, and resilience is not loud. It is quiet confidence that, whatever state arises, you know how to work with your own mind.